All right, we're on. Okay, I'm here with, well, this is, a unique intro for me. So let me just get this out the way that you put it on your website. So I'm here with Buck Angel, who's a pornographic film actor and producer, a sex educator, and motivational speaker. And I would also maybe add entrepreneur, because I think you got some
Mhm.
stuff going on in that realm, right?
Yeah.
So you got a lot of titles, and I got to say, you're not the first pornographic film actor I've had on the podcast. Even though,
Great.
really, that's not, sex and gender is not a typical focus of mine on this podcast. I'm usually dealing with plant medicine, spirituality, yoga, music, psychology, but really because um, trans has become a much more mainstream topic over the past number of years, that I think it's extending into people's lives who may not have had much experience with trans people. So we've got parents who may have lived a very kind of conventional straight life whose kids are coming out as trans, or their kids' friends at school are coming out as trans, or people like myself who work as counselors or coaches. We're getting more and more young people as clients who are identifying as trans. And so I think the conversation should be broadened, um, to include people who aren't necessarily living that life or have a lot of exposure to it, because really it's becoming so much more prevalent. So I guess my intention with this conversation and why I reached out to you is to help broaden that conversation, to help deepen my own understanding of the trans experience. And I wanted to talk to you because I've been listening to you for years, and I've always appreciated your point of view, your forthrightness about talking about these issues, which can be really difficult and scary topics for people who aren't really embedded in those communities or living that trans life themselves. So I wanted to bring some clarity to trans, what that means, what it was like for you to transition at a time when it was much more rare and far less talked about, and what you're seeing now as a mentor to younger trans people. And so I always try to like offer a little medicine in every episode. So what are the things that we need to know in order to better support people in our lives who are going through a transition? And even for people who are transitioning, maybe some kind of sage wisdom from a trans elder. So that's why I invited you here. And I'm hoping that we can offer, like I said, a little medicine and a little better understanding for people. So thanks a lot for agreeing to talk to me. I really appreciate it.
Oh, that's so beautiful. Like, make me cry because we need people like you. And in order for us as trans people to move through the world in a place that's safe for us and comfortable for us, the rest of the world needs to sort of understand where we are coming from. And as an elder, I'm a lot different than the newer community. I'm all about having these conversations. I'm all about educating, where I find a lot of times there's people in my community that push back on that and expect the world to understand us without us sort of stepping up and saying, this is how we are, this is what we deal with. Because I find building bridges has made my life so much better. And I used to be that guy who pushed back on everybody. You don't know me, blah. And then I realized that's not helping. That's actually hurting us. And so I have stepped up to sort of, I'm not a spokesperson. I want people to also understand I'm not a representation. I am just me and how I did my situation. And I understand it in a way that a lot of people newer to this are coming to it in a different way. And so I think age does play a big part in a lot of things, not even just necessarily being trans. It could be anything in your life, but age and doing these, like yoga or being a master or doing these things, you learn that through age and through, lots of time under your belt. So I appreciate you giving me the time to educate people who want to be educated around what's happening now, because trans is becoming a bigger space for a lot of, especially youth. And so
Hmm.
that's important to me as an elder. The youth are my focus. I don't necessarily focus so much on older people transitioning. I focus on the younger people transitioning because that's the future of not only my community, but the future of the world.
Hmm. Well, I think one of the reasons why it's a difficult conversation for people to have, and particularly, I hate these kind of terms, but like, let's just say like straight heterosexual
Yeah,
people who don't have a lot of exposure to queer culture, trans culture, whatever, right?
yeah,
So just to say, like, put it out there up front, I kind of hate these limiting terms,
yeah,
but we
me
got to
too.
use them for the sake of conversation.
That's right.
And just so you know where I'm coming from. So I think one of the reasons why it's a difficult conversation to have is because there's not a lot of understanding and there is
Right,
confusion about the terms that are being used. And, you know, so I thought maybe a great place to start is just talking about maybe if there is a difference between transgender and transsexual,
yeah,
because we hear the term trans a lot, but I'm not actually certain whether we're always talking about both or if we're talking
right.
about one or the other.
Excellent question, and I appreciate that. So you're right. They're two different things, and on some level, um, it's important that we understand the difference. So what happened was early, many 100 million years ago, transsexual was the term, and transsexual really specifically was a very specific thing where it was a person like me who was born female, biologically female, and never mentally felt that way, and had gender dysphoria, which is not having, your brain match the outside of the way you look, and really wanting the world to see me as this guy and not as that girl. So that was a transsexual person who literally took a medical space, removed my breast, took testosterone in order to physically manifest this man so that my brain felt comfortable walking the world. That's really a transsexual person, and really went to the binary. It went from a man to a woman and a woman to a man. And we always sort of lived in that space. Then fast forward to this newer space, which about 10 years ago came into play, which became a transgender space and became a transgender umbrella term, which encompasses a lot of different types of people and not specifically me. So gender nonconforming, gender fluid, gender queer, female to male, male. It's a variation of non-binary. It seems to be a new, bigger space. And these are people who sort of fight against this idea of binary and that biology is not real and all of these other spaces that I on some level disagree with. So I had to separate myself from this idea of transgender, which did not represent me. I literally had a sex change on some level. And so I realized that now there's these two different spaces in this community, and that these two spaces are now punching at each other, which is also a very difficult space to be in. So instead of, I'm all about harmony, I'm all about coexisting, and coexisting is a way that you build a bridge. So people need to understand there are people in the world that medically transition like me, who want to just walk through the world as a man and be seen that way, though we do understand we are I'm biologically female. That will never change. I'm 100%, I still have a vagina. I walk the world that way. And I don't discount that I used to be female. Well, now we have a newer generation of transgender people who fight biology and who don't necessarily agree with a lot of what I agree with, which is having a sex change. And they just want to be trans as an identity, I guess is the best way for me to explain it. I am not trans. I don't identify as a trans person. I identify as a man. So now we have trans
Wow.
as an identity, which is a whole other level. And now within that context, you don't need to have gender dysphoria in order to be trans, which, again, now on some level have co-opted this language and have created this space. Why do you think more children are calling themselves trans today? Because on some level, it's an identity. It's
Mhm.
not a medical space. And so I think, I hope I kind of on some level really explained that. Did
Well,
I?
what it explains is maybe why there's so much confusion.
Yes,
And
yes,
so,
yes.
sending out compassion to everyone who feels confused about this issue, because it
That's right.
sounds like within that trans umbrella, there is a lot of confusion of terms.
That's right. And also pushing on people like me who transitioned 25 years ago only to be binary. I believe in biology. It's the reason I'm trans. I was born a woman and I wanted to be a man. That was the whole basis of trans. Now that's not the basis of the newer generation and again, I don't want anybody to think I'm fighting against that. I am not. I believe everyone is entitled to a space in this world and to be a space. But what I do know as an elder and somebody who has been fighting for my space is that you will never win by punching people in the face. How you will win is by building bridges and not overriding space. but to say, I want to coexist with you. And this is what I really try to explain to her. I want to coexist with you, my friend. You're a biological man. I am not. I'm a transsexual man. But we can coexist in the world as men as long as we respect each other's spaces in that space. And that's the important part of my work today, is I'm trying to get people to understand, I don't want to run you over, but I do feel that there's people in my community that want to sort of engulf space and not hear the other side. And that's not a way you make change.
Mm. Yeah, and I think that's particularly become an issue with biological women and transgender women, if those are the right terms.
Yes.
Especially, you know, I think a lot of people became aware of this struggle when J.K. Rowling got called out for being transphobic, which I didn't read anything in what she wrote that signaled that to me, but of course I'm coming from a certain perspective, so I might have blinders on when it comes to that.
No, but you're also entitled. Here's the other thing. Trans people don't think you're entitled to have an opinion, and I disagree. I'm that guy who sort of stands in another space with the majority of the voice, because I don't agree with that. And I think everyone deserves to have an entitled opinion, because you are, even though you're not in the community, you're entitled to say, well, actually, I read it and I don't logically see. I read everything she wrote. And as a transsexual man, I disagree. She is not transphobic. She is a woman who is voicing her opinion and her feelings. So if trans people are entitled to voice their feelings, which they are, why is not the other side entitled to voice their opinion? You can't shut down voices because you disagree. You have to find that middle ground or have some kind of discussion to move forward. But they immediately jumped on her and called her transphobic for some of the things she said, which, you know, could hurt our feelings. But why are we not listening? It's like when you have a lover and you have to hear, you might not want to hear it, but you got to hear it in order to create a better relationship.
I think especially because she's a woman, and I've heard similar concerns from other women about men who haven't done a biological transition coming into female spaces, and actually that making them feel unsafe, but also that it's kind of diminishing the amount of work and progress that women have made over the past 50 or 60 years to fight for their own equality and rights.
That's right. And I will say this, and why I get called transphobic, because I'm not picking sides, and I'm just saying I grew up as a woman. Half my life I lived as a lesbian woman and a butch woman. I mean, let me tell you about that. That's a whole other level of living in the world. But that said, I fought for women's rights. I'm still a feminist. I live that life, and it's so for me. What happens is that I see trans women who were socially raised as men and transitioning to women because they're just like me. They never felt male. But we cannot discount the fact that I was socialized as a woman and they were socialized as men. So when they come in and they say trans women are women, you know, that's a little bit insulting to some of these women, like JK. She's saying, but wait a minute, you're not. You don't have the same experience. You don't get pregnant. You don't have these feelings of menstruation. And then they start coming back and saying, well, that's transphobic to say you have to have menstruation to be a woman. But they're discounting where women are coming from. Women are not saying we don't want you to be part of us. They're saying you are different than us. And that's an actual factual statement. Transgender women are different than biological women. And there's this fight to say all women are all women. And, you know, I've always walked the world as a man with a vagina. I will always say that. But I never discounted my biology. And I always said, yes, I'm a man with a vagina, but that's because I was born a woman and blah, 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 right? So we're discounting that conversation when we come to it, and we're just saying you don't like us because we're trans and we're going to run over you and shut your voice down, which is what happened to women forever. So now they're fighting back. And so I have to say that I'm not picking sides. I'm just sort of being it's a mediator on some level. I'm trying to be a mediator.
Mm-hmm. And it seems to me that this is another example that we see in so many different areas of our culture. Where it becomes super problematic when we lump people into these broad categories and we start to pit one group against the other. that really seems to be the biggest problem. So when we're talking about trans, it becomes problematic when we lose the distinction between transsexual and transgender.
Right.
And so without clarity, we get confusion, and with confusion, we get conflict, and we lose compassion. So it seems like it all comes down to, let's just be really clear on what we're talking about when we're talking about things, and talk about specifics. Let's not generalize. And yeah, so maybe it's that attention to the details, right, is one of the keys here.
Well, yeah, 100%. I've been doing this work for 20 plus years and the world loves me. I have no problem. Everyone knows I'm the man with the vagina. Nobody freaks out on me anymore. It took me a long time to get to that space, but it's because, again, I meet you in the middle. I'm willing to have the conversation. I'm different than you, but at the same time, I'm still human. But this is the thing I'm going to be honest about, that I'm very disturbed with this new transgender, and I call it an agenda, because they're not willing to have the conversation. They are steamrolling over people. They're saying, we are going to transition a 6-year-old, whether you like it or not, even though we don't have any kind of long-term research on hormone blockers. We're still going to tell you, if you don't transition your child, you're a bad parent. I will not be a part of that, because I will guarantee you there will be some backlash in 5 years when this 5-year-old who's taking hormone blockers is now 10 and decides, but wait a minute, mommy, I made a mistake. I'm actually really a boy. What's going to happen in that case? And there's already cases of that from, the 60s and 70s where they did that, where kids ended up, killing themselves because they did not feel the way that they were supposed to be told they were. And so, these are the things we don't want to talk about. We're just saying to you, you have to transition a child whether you like it or not, or else that child will kill themselves. But people are like, but wait a minute, where's the research on that? And how are you, and this person, and a person who struggled as a child, I still disagree with just handing out stuff and transitioning people like that. We are not inserting mental health care. And really everything, I'm a big believer that everything starts here. And once you start to work on your brain, everything else will figure that out. But if we just sort of go to the physical, we're always going to the physical without understanding the mental, then I have issues with that. And so I feel like we're sort of pushing on the world to say, accept us or you're transphobic. And that's not how you work things out. It's just not.
Mm-hmm. A lot of the work that I do is about supporting people in their transformation.
Mm-hmm.
And the way that I look at it is that I really think that our ultimate purpose in this life is to become who we are really meant to be in this lifetime, and to shed all of the societal and familial conditioning that gets put on us, so that our true self becomes most expressed. And that's seems to be this lifetime journey, becoming more and more who I'm meant to be. And in that, finding what my gifts are, and then learning how to share them in a way that's generous and charitable and all of that, to be of service in the world with my unique gifts. And I guess when I started to come into contact with more trans-identified people, there were a lot of young people, a lot of millennials and Gen, what are they called now? Gen Y or Gen Z?
Yeah.
Gen Z.
Oh, Gen Z, right? Yeah.
I'm Gen
I'm
X.
so confused.
Yeah.
I'm a boomer.
And as a yoga practitioner and someone who's studied that philosophy and really sees the value in it, when I started to come into contact with more trans-identified people, my initial reaction was, this is the most yogic thing I've ever seen in the culture, where people are saying no to these identity categories, which are ultimately very limiting in terms of personal self-expression. And I thought, wow, this is a major breakthrough in our culture, that people are saying no to these old terms, right? That some guy came up with, not that long ago, actually. And seeing how that just kind of limits you and constricts you to fit in. And I thought, wow, this is really amazing. This is maybe some big wave that's coming in our collective consciousness.
Yeah.
And then it seemed to quickly turn into its own identity issue. And again, then the pendulum swung from the hope of more freedom, more individual expression, to like, oh God, more like limitation, more conflict. And, you know, it's easy for me to understand as someone who's a student of psychology and someone who's lived as a young person and grown into an older person, that like one of the things that we're searching for is a sense of identity. Like,
That's right.
who am I? What am I here for? What's my place in the world? And when there's something out there that allows you to take on an identity, you get a sense of belonging, you get a sense of meaning and purpose. This is what everyone on earth is seeking for. And for me, it was getting into music. So it was like in the music world, you know, I found an identity. I was a guitar player. I was a guitar player who played a certain kind of music. I had the hair, I had the tattoos, like, you know, it was like there was an identity there that helped me find my place in the world. But that didn't really feel limiting to me in any way because it wasn't political.
Mm-hmm.
Right. And so I think that's when we get into it being problematic, is when it's tied up in the politics. Politics are always divisive because to have politics, you need two groups.
Right. That's right.
And so I understand why people would be longing to find an identity. And here's something that comes along that says, you know, you're unique and special. You're different from the norm, from the mainstream, and that's got its own attractiveness to it, right? Yep. To be different than the norms, which, you know, looking out at American culture now, which seeps into Canadian culture, it's not very attractive. Like, it looks really dull and boring. So I get the attraction. Now, what are you seeing with kids? Why has this become such a big, powerful movement in the past 10 years? Why wasn't it that way for the past 30 or 40 years?
You don't think I ask that question to myself every day, especially growing up and becoming a transsexual man and dealing with it? I lost all my friends when I transitioned 25 years ago. The same people who are saying they're trans now were the ones who are going, gross, you're a traitor, you're leaving us to become a man. Like, these were gay women. Now many of these gay women are becoming trans. So
So when you transitioned, it was like the 90s, I think, right?
Yeah, exactly.
So in the 90s,
nobody doing it.
Yeah, right. So there's no benefit to you transitioning. It was actually harder for you to transition. So you didn't get any kind of social credit.
I got the worst pushback. The only thing that was amazing was I found two doctors who had never done this surgery before. And one of them called me his guinea pig, the endocrinologist who started putting testosterone in my body. He said, I have no idea what's going on here. We're just going to do it willy-nilly. And same with my chest surgeon. So really, I did come from a space that is 100 times different. And so because of that, my eyes are seeing a different space. And what I see, which is not a popular opinion, but what I see is social media. I see indoctrination, which is really a yucky word. And I don't really mean to use it in a way other than to say that I see what kids always see and they have seen forever. What you just said, I'm different. I want to be different. I don't want to be a part of this. I feel different. So I must be trans. Remember what I said earlier? Trans is an identity. It is not a mental illness or a gender dysphoria, which is where I come from. I literally could not live in my skin anymore. These kids aren't even doing what I did. They're not doing medical transitioning. They're non-binary. And it's all under this trans umbrella. So again, it's an identity choice. It's not necessarily, and then on top of that, you know, they've literally co-opted the word transgender and rewritten what the definition is. And now the definition doesn't even include dysphoria. So you don't even need to have dysphoria to be trans. So do you see what I'm saying to you right now? It is complete opposite of where I come from. Yet there are many kids like me. And those are the kids I see. The kids I see are the medically necessary transitioning kids who need to be men and women and need to live in that binary space and need to have this in order to move forward in the world, where the newer generation doesn't necessarily need that. And they have a different idea. Again, important for them because it is an important identity. But at the same time, why are we fighting each other and saying like mine's better than yours or yours? Nobody's saying that. I'm saying you have a different way of transitioning. But for me, what I see is people see it out there. Kids see it out there, and kids want things that look cool and awesome. And now being trans is kind of the cool thing.
Yeah. Well,
Yeah.
what I'm really getting the sense of is that someone who is dealing with gender dysphoria, it's the way that I would put it, it's the soul pushing toward this externalization of the inner reality.
Yeah.
And that, I've been able to meet a couple people over the past few years who had a biological transition, both female to male
Hmm.
or woman to man,
Right.
whatever,
Female to
whatever
male. Yeah, that's
we could
right.
say
I
that,
know it's confusing.
female to male. So we
Yes.
can just say that.
Yes.
And that's really what they manifest, that's how I see them and relate to them.
Yeah.
But the amount of courage that takes, like when I think about those kind of surgeries and that decision and the no going back from that,
Right.
it scares the shit out of me. And so I can get a sense of the kind of courage and strength of will that it requires to actually do that transition. So it's not a whim, and it's
Mm-mm.
not a like a social play in that case. So just honoring that, and then I think maybe what you're pointing to, and maybe not coming right out and saying, but there are some people who are exploiting that because it gives them some social credit, but also some also power.
That's right.
And I think the power happens in a lot of ways because the adults, so the parents, the teachers, whoever, don't really understand what's going on and feel so uncertain about it that they're unable to push back at all or to ask kids to wait. So they relinquish their power because they feel completely uncertain, like they're not standing on any solid ground. They have no real sense of what's going on. So the reaction is go give the kid all of the power and let the kid make the decisions in the guise of just supporting, right? And I think that's where it gets really, really tricky because the parents really do want to support their kids,
That's
but
right.
they're not really clear what's going on. So I think one of the things that you advocate for is therapy really early on from the outset
Right.
when this starts arising. What kind of therapy helped you, and what do you think is going to help people get really clear on the right decisions to make?
Right. Great question. So I am a huge advocate for mental health. It's the reason I'm here. That said, back in the day when I wanted to transition, there was no help. Every therapist told me that I was a gay woman or that I was just a woman and I have to deal with it. Or I was a very masculine woman because these are the tools they had. So I had no help from psychology. They put me on, I went to a psychiatrist because I tried to commit suicide. And after that, I was just like a total mess of a kid and I was shut down and I became a cutter. And, so people need to understand I have a lot of compassion for these kids going through this stuff. But like I said, my focus is more on the kids who really have dysphoria and really do want to commit suicide as opposed to just wanting to be trans. And there's a huge difference out there right now. And so I do believe that we need to start to educate more therapists and we need to start to get more people involved in mental health care. And we do need to make it mandatory. We have taken that off the table. It used to be that you had a structure within transition. And the reason you had that was to safely help this person. I have never looked back. And that's because I literally was in a structure. I had to get a note to go to a therapist, to get to get surgery. You don't have to do any of that. They have a thing called self-ID now, which pretty much states that if I say I'm trans, my parents cannot. And in Canada, right now, it's really hardcore. And there's a parent who's actually almost being put in jail because they are saying, no, I don't want my child to have surgery. And no, I don't want my child. And they're actually saying that it's against the law in Canada for you to go against your child who says they are trans and they want, even though they're underage. So there's a lot of stuff that's happening that I'm like, wait, parents aren't there for a reason. Parents need to have help. We're not helping parents. We're shutting the parents down and saying, tough. That's just how it is, whether you like it or not. And parents are like, but wait a minute, this is my child. You can't just, why do kids have to, why are kids have to be a certain age to drink alcohol? Why do kids have to be a certain age to drive a car? Why do they have to be a certain age to do certain things? But they don't have to be a certain age to start medically transitioning? I mean, am I being illogical? I'm confused at how we can make it so accessible. And now we have a thing called detransitioners, who are kids who did take that path and are now going, whoops, wrong, mistake, yet they remove their breasts, they look like me, and they're totally, completely destroyed from it. And we don't talk about that in my community. I'm the guy who says, well, wait, when things are being shoved under the rug, why is that? Why doesn't people want to talk about it? It's not a pretty part of our community, but it's a part that will help us become a healthier community. And so for me, the fact that we don't educate parents, and the fact that we're giving children this self-ID, and the fact that we do not have a structure, and the fact that WPATH, which is the World Psychological Association for Transgender Healthcare, literally removed all of that, says to me, wait a minute, and there's no other opposing opinions. They don't even let opposing opinions in. If you have an opposing opinion like I do, they shut you down. You're not even allowed to come and speak at these conferences. You're not allowed to have an opposing opinion. And that again says to me, I'm a little concerned with this behavior, because that sounds very cultish on some level, where if you don't go along with the thing, they are also telling kids to disconnect from their parents. They actually say that. Disconnect from your parents. They don't understand you. They hate you. Just stop talking to them. And I can't be a part of this. It's unhealthy. It's unhealthy in the fact that your parents are part of your life, and they should be part of your life. And to educate our parents is the way we have a healthier transition and a healthier space in the world.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's upsetting to me. I'll be honest with you. As you can see, probably, I just don't understand what we're doing, and I see it very sloppy. And what I see is a mess that will happen in the next 5 years, because people are pushing back against us now. And people don't like what we're doing, and people feel as if they're being put in a space to accept it without understanding it. And you can't do that. You can't force people to accept something they don't understand.
Yeah. That's kind of shocking to me to hear that parents are being really disempowered
Yes.
to have
Yes.
any say in the direction of their
Can you
young
imagine if you
kids'
had a
life.
child right now, and your child comes down and says, hey, daddy, I'm a boy, I'm not really a girl. And of course you being, well, that's really great. Okay, let's figure this out. And then next thing you know, you have no say so in the matter. You have none. If
Yeah.
your 12-year-old or 13-year-old child says, I want to stay taking hormone blockers, it's like you actually legally have to let them start taking hormone blockers. And I'm like, I have an 8-year-old. I'll tell you what, that ain't going to happen in my watch. I will fight that. You know what I mean? I will say, no, I'm going to let my 8-year-old dress like a girl, right? And be cool and socially transition. That's a social transition, which is what we had to do back in the day. And we had to literally socially transition. I had to look like a boy, act like a boy, walk around like a boy. And I did that as a child. My parents did that without even understanding that. They let me be. And so really social transitioning gives you a taste of what you're about to get into. And that's very important that we do that. We give you a taste. I think I
Yeah.
lost you.
Your video froze, but all the audio is good, so we got it.
Okay, yeah, internet.
I know. You're in California too, right? So there's a
Yeah.
lot going on down there.
Oh man, if I showed you outside right now, it looks like the end of the world. It's actually so scary.
Yeah.
But it's Mother Earth, I'm binary. I'm making the Earth binary, but it's real. Mother Earth is pissed.
Well, yeah, I was thinking about this morning. My wife and I were looking at some of the videos of California, Washington State, and Oregon. And like, there's a map where everything's lit up. There's fires everywhere. And
Everywhere.
the thing,
Everywhere.
the thing that came to me is that currently there are protests going on in these major American cities,
Yeah.
and people shouting to basically burn it down. And that's what's happening, is things are burning down, and just, my heart goes out to everybody.
It's a tough time here in the United States, and we need to be having pushback. I'm a believer of that. We need to end this racist nonsense. We need to start to have conversation. But I'm not a believer of You know, I used to come from that space of destruction. I'll be honest with you. When I was young, I was all about that, and lighting shit on fire and breaking shit down. And that's the only way you're going to make change. And as I got older, it's interesting how things can change as you get older. I started to realize that is not the way you make change. People will not, it'll actually destroy everything. Where how do we find that common ground? I'm like, how do we build the bridge? How do we, people forget the word coexist. Coexist is an actually positive thing. I believe in that. It's like, I'm not going to change you and you're not going to change me, but how can we actually learn to work together? This to me is what's happening in the more powerful part of the trans community. I don't think we're listening, and I don't think we're wanting to listen. I think there's a lot of anger and a lot of resentment and a lot of this idea that the whole world is transphobic, and that's not true.
Mm. You know, as you're speaking, I was reminded of this African proverb, which I don't know if you've ever heard it, but there's variations of it, but it goes something like, beware the uninitiated children, because they'll come back to burn down the village just to feel its warmth.
Whoa, that just gave me the chills. Seriously, like, wow. I mean, everything about that. And so that's what I'm saying. When you start to push on people and to tell them they're not a part of, and that's with anything, people are going to come back at you. And so for some reason, it's a part. I don't want to misrepresent this community. There's many amazing, beautiful people who are part of it, but there's some part of this community that has become very powerful and very, what's the word I'm looking for? I don't want to use the word cult, but it has become this space where if you don't get on board with what they say is, then you are not part of. And, you know, I just disagree with that. You have to have different opinions in any community. We have to have different opinions and different spaces to come from. We just celebrate our differences. We're not doing that. We're saying you have to be this one way or you're not going to be a part of.
Yeah. You know, you touched on this by speaking about how your point of view and your approach has changed over the years with age and lived experience and seeing what doesn't work. And this also touches to the point of kids today not having initiation, so not having a ritual that honors them and their place in the community. And so there's that uncertainty, there's that struggle to find yourself and find your place. And you know, all of the social justice movement is kind of mixed up in this. Like there's some real issues that we need to take care of, but there's this whole other thing about people finding purpose and meaning in the world. And when your purpose and meaning gets mixed up in the political, it becomes really problematic, because when you really know yourself and you're secure in yourself, there's no need to force change on anyone else.
That's right.
Right?
That's right.
You're more accepting.
I mean, that's so beautiful what you say. And that's why I don't force my beliefs on anyone ever. I never have. I never will. I've always said I was a man with a vagina. You accept it or you don't. I don't really care. I walk the world naked, my friend. People are like, oh,
literally.
What's that? Yeah, literally. And I never have cared. But what I did say was, if you don't accept that that's your thing, you move right on. I have never forced anybody. People say all kinds of crazy stuff. I got death threats. I got everything. It's like, wow. That just made me more powerful in my own mind. I was like, why are people giving me death threats because of my vagina? Like, that's so insane. But it just made me actually feel more powerful in the sense that I didn't make you. I just put myself out there, whether you accept it or not. And I think today, I think what's happening is that the youth are getting this message. They're getting a message to say, tell people to fuck off, use all these horrible language, TERF, transphobic. They're literally making stuff up that's so negative and I keep telling these kids, what you put out in the world comes back to you. You are putting out mean, angry stuff. That's what's going to come back to you, and why you don't feel good about yourself. But watch, just try this trick for one day. Be nice to the whole world. Say nice things to people. Enjoy life, and watch how different kids come back to me like, wow, Trampa. I'm like, it's magic. It's literally magic. If you're angry, anger comes at you. And I'm just trying to be this person that says, I refuse to shut down my voice. I refuse to just sort of say, oh, what I say makes people angry. I refuse to do that, because I also am entitled to have my own beliefs and believe that this is not the proper way to be doing things. Yet, because I don't go along with the sort of language and this idea, I'm this bad person. And that says a lot to me. I'm on some level doing an experiment with my community, seeing like, if you don't get on board, you're this outcast. And that says something very, very bad to me.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Kind of like what I was going toward there in talking about your perspective changing as you grew older, and how we have a lack of initiation rites in our culture at large. So people don't know really where they fit in.
Right.
There's less guides now, because it takes an initiated person to become a real elder and mentor. And I think, your transition in your 20s or 30s, that was your initiation into really becoming who you are. And you can see the confidence pours out of you. I mean, to be able to put yourself on display in the way you have takes an incredible amount of security and knowing yourself, and that confidence that this is who I am. And like you said, I don't need you to accept me.
That's right.
Right?
I
So
just don't need it.
this to me, like, is the requirement to be a good mentor or elder. And so I love you.
Thank you.
You affectionately call yourself a Tranpa.
Yeah, I
And
care. I love
yeah,
these kids. I only what I'm gonna cry right now because it's how powerful my transition is for me. It
yeah,
is not a joke. It is something that literally, figuratively saved my life. So the fact that I have to argue with people who are on the same path as me upsets me, makes me sad, makes me feel as if they're not hearing what I want is only the best for people in this community. What I don't want is for people to get in a space that is not for them and to regret what has been a gift for me. And when we start to see people latching on to something that is so incredibly a gift that was given to you and not understanding that gift, that's upsetting to me, because then I see those people being led down the wrong path. And when you're being led down the wrong path, the only thing that's going to come from that is destruction. And so for me as an elder, I would be, for lack of a better word, an asshole if I didn't go, hold up, kids, something isn't right here. And of course, I'm going to get pushback. 100% I am, because I'm not on board with this idea that everyone is trans if they say they are. That is a misconception and a dangerous space to be in. And as you see, I get very emotional because it saved my life and it will save others' life. But if we take it in this direction it's going, it will not do that. It will do destruction. And that hurts my heart more than anything.
yeah. And I think the ability to discern for whom it's going to be a life-saving
That's
transition
right.
is one thing, and to
That's right.
discern between that and someone who it's potentially going to be life-destroying or life-altering in a way that isn't healthy for them, right?
No, it will kill them. I mean, it will. The detransitioners, I watch them like a hawk because they're suicidal. They're like, "What happened?" And I'm like, "Well, why did this happen?" I never looked back. It was never a space that I would ever say I'm the most happiest person in the world because I'm this man, and the world sees me that way. And then there's these kids who literally said, "Why did I do this? It's the most horrible thing I ever did." And that's a reflection on me on somehow, because why did it work for me but not for them? And why are we not using these kids right now as a means and a way to study what will be the best for each person? And this isn't a fit all. It is far from a fit all. Everybody's transition will be different. But that being said, when we aren't having conversation of why are youth detransitioning, if we're not having that conversation, that says to me we're hiding something. And that, again, says to me unhealthy community.
Mm-hmm. What I immediately go to is kind of in the opposite, not looking at the end result and the potential consequences of that, but just
Mm-hmm.
my inclination is to go to the source of the impulse. So, what do you need? Like when a young person comes out and says, I'm trans,
Mm-hmm.
immediately I want to think, what is the need that's
Yeah.
being expressed here?
Right.
And so, kind of what I infer in that is, I need to be seen. I need to know what my place is in this world. I need a sense of personal power
Yeah.
and agency and autonomy. I need to make my own choices. And that to me is a call for initiation.
Yeah.
And I think if we address those needs, then they'll be more healthily expressed.
That's right.
Then that person will go, okay, I feel seen. I feel like have a sense of power and autonomy. Now, what is the right choice?
That's right. That's
Right?
beautiful. I mean, wow, that's just such a beautiful, we need to get that kind of language into our community. We don't have that kind of
I
language. I
know.
mean, I just see such anger. It's shocking. It's like they feed, you know, again, you can feed off people's energy. You and I both know that. And I feel that that's what's happening. People are feeding off each
Oh,
other's
yeah.
anger of that not being accepted, what they need. What is it that you need? And I know what it is. They do. That's exactly what they need. They need to be seen. They need all of this control over themselves. And how do we do it without it sort of um, taking on this idea that that means you're trans, right? Because that's the code word now. Trans is, I remember when it was gay. Gay was the big thing, right? We were fought for gay right. Everything was gay, gay, gay. And now everything is trans, trans, trans. That's why I know
Well,
it's,
gay has been so normalized over the past
yes,
20 or 30 years that it
yes,
doesn't have quite the same shine or power
that's
to it
right.
anymore, right?
That's right.
It's
Where
like
it did
there's
before.
Will and Grace. Well, they're kind of like normal now, and like gay guys are kind of like the new yuppies or something, right? So,
That's so true.
but like when I was growing up, there I had, maybe there's less trans people, or maybe I just didn't see them,
Right.
but for me, it was gay men who were the real counterculture and
Mhm.
vanguards. And
That's
it
right.
was through my relationships as a young man with older gay men who really knew themselves, who had been through the struggle, who were like just owning who they are and expressing that, like real artists and like shamanic types who helped me love myself and to become more confident and to like around gay men and gay culture, I felt free to express who I really am in a way that I never did in, the normie
Right.
culture.
That's right.
And so like when I grew up in the 80s and 90s, it was like gay was like the counterculture. And I think after Will and Grace, man, everything started to get more mainstream and acceptance is wonderful. But then I think kids are now looking for like, what's the most counterculture thing I could be? Or
That's
what's the
right.
thing in the culture right now that holds the most power and influence? And it's like social justice, um, you know,
That's right.
identity politics, that
Yep.
kind of thing, right?
Yep, that's exactly right. 100%. That's why I say it's an identity choice. It is not an actual medical condition because once they took dysphoria off the table, and kids go, but Grandpa, you don't need dysphoria to be trans. I'm like, oh, what? And why are you? That's like saying you don't need to be attracted to the same sex to be gay. That's like basically you're going to rewrite what it means to be gay. Like, no, people will fight back on that. And so I get it. I 100% get it. And I think you're totally on the right track there. But how do we sort of bring attention to this without sort of saying you're not and you're bad for doing this?
Yeah.
And that's the part where I'm caught in the middle because I'm looking like a bad person to a lot of the youth because I'm saying nope, that's not right. Trans men are not men, trans men are trans men. And when you say that, or trans women are not women, they're trans women. And when you co-opt another space, number one, what about the other space you co-opted? Number two, what about our special needs? We are special people. We're not men and women. We are trans. That means we have different bodies, we have different needs. And when you take that off the table, you have now taken our existence off the table and we don't coexist. We are that. No, because if I go to the doctor, I'm not going to get a prostate exam. I need to go to the gynecologist forever. So how is that
Mhm.
male? It's not. On some level, that's female, but I need to let the doctor know that
Yeah.
I'm a trans man. I'm not just a man. So the fact that I have to fight against this biological space, and you don't have to believe in biology, I don't care. But for me, what it means is that it's the reason you're trans, number one. Number two, medically in the world, if we deny our biology, we are screwed. I've had many health issues because of my transition. I'm one of the first recorded cases of long-term use of testosterone on a female-bodied reproductive system,
Uh,
which
you-
atrophied, and I got really sick from it. And yet, we're not even talking about stuff like that. We're just giving kids hormones and blockers, and not even. And how irresponsible of the medical world. Very irresponsible.
yeah. Well, I think, you do get blowback, and you probably get a lot of hate mail and hate
Yep.
DMs for
Yes.
sure. But I think this is like, part of being the role of elder is that
Yeah,
you're going to speak
yeah,
truth to power, and you're going to speak from your point of view,
right.
which is like secure and based on lots of lived experience, you know? So you're not always going to be popular, but I think we actually need more of that. We
Yeah,
need more mature, secure adults who are
yeah,
willing to stand up for what they have learned in life,
yeah.
like for what is right. Um, and
That's
I guess I wanted to talk to you about this, how you've taken on this role of mentor.
right.
And when I look out there, of course, again, like I'm not directly in this community,
Mm.
but I don't see a lot of other older people. Like you're in your late 50s now.
Yeah, I'm 58.
I
Yeah,
don't see honestly anyone else like you out
right.
there who's acting as elder slash mentor for young people. And I'm wondering if that's something that I'm just not seeing, or is that your experience too, that there's not a
Oh
lot
no,
of,
it's my experience.
yeah,
There is very few. I have friends who are my age who transition, but they don't have the same transition time. Number one, they don't want to get involved. They're like, dude, I'm not touching that. And I'm like, I kind of don't blame you, to be
yeah,
honest with you, but I don't, because it isn't easy to be this space. It's hard. Every day I wake up to what you just said. Hey, well, I'm going to kill you. You're a bad tranny. We're going to cancel you. The whole cancel culture thing has made people scared to say it, because people actually lose their jobs. So I'm very blessed to be in a space that the universe gave me, that I'm not scared to lose my job, because I created a space that I have abundance. And that said, it's why I talk to the youth. I want to help them create abundance in their life. And I want to help them create a space that they're not just trans. This idea that you're just trans is so locking. It's like, I'm a yoga instructor. Is that all you are? No, you're not. You do a lot of other things in the world. And so I'm trying to get these kids out of that mindset. But, there are very few elders, and the elders that are coming up are younger than me. So they're, maybe 10 or 15 years into their transition. Those are now considered elders in the community. But I am probably the voice, the oldest voice and the most elder that has stepped up to do this. And I only do it because I believe if I save one kid, then I
yeah.
did my purpose here. And I know, because I mentor a lot of kids who really respect my voice, and they do see what I'm trying to do is to create a space for them. I only want them to have what I have, which is an amazing life. I don't want anything else for these kids except to grow up and be successful and to move through the world and enjoy life. That's the whole reason you transition.
Mm. Yeah, man, I hear that. That's all I
Yeah.
want for people too.
Yeah.
And it seems to me like this is your soul's calling, brother, that you're a vanguard. You're going to be the first to step out there, and that's not an easy path, right? But I think
I'm like,
yeah, but you're specially equipped for it. Obviously, you've got you're very clear, you're a very compassionate person. I could tell you really live in your heart, and you've got a lot of energy and strength, which is kind of like amazing to me. I'm 45. You're, I think, 58.
I'm 58.
And to see your level of energy and how fit you keep yourself is inspiring to me as a middle-aged man.
Right on. Thank you,
Um,
Fred.
but you're a leader, right? And so you're maybe like one of the lone voices out there,
Yeah.
being an older mentor. But I think you're going to raise another generation of mentors.
I think so. People are starting to see the importance of it. And again, they don't have to have the same opinion as me. The whole point of being a mentor is to bring your experience in and to share your experience. And so that kid doesn't make the same mistake. That's what I tell the kid. Like, I don't want you to make the same mistakes I made. I already made them. And
Yeah, I
here,
made them for you.
yeah, exactly. Here, you don't have to do it.
Totally.
I have to tell you, the best choice I did make was to not get the bottom surgery. Now, that being said, it's very important for a lot of these kids to get a penis, and I'm grateful that they have the opportunity to do that. But that said, I also want kids to know you don't have to do that to be a man. You don't have to do that in order to have a great sex life or to even walk the world. And I have lovers, I have a wife, I have kids, I have all kinds of great, beautiful people in my life, and I have great sex. And so that being said, that's also really important part of manipulating your body to where you need it to be, not where the world needs it to be, because the world would love for me to have a penis. Then I would have a full sex change, right? But it's very, on some level, shocking for people to find out I have a penis. And I have a sculpture that an
You don't
artist,
have a penis.
I don't have a penis. Right, exactly. Do I or don't I? I have 10 penises in my drawer. But that being said, you know, I have a sculpture that was made by a great artist, and it sits in a museum in Australia, and it's a full nude sculpture of me that really every day millions of people get to see this sculpture of me, and it's there, and it really represents a space in the world that says we're not all the same. I am a man who has a vagina, who used to be a woman, and these people walk the world, and we now need to expose that there's all different kinds of people in the world, and however you want to identify should be respected. But
Yeah.
don't disrespect other people's space because you don't believe in it.
Right. Like, do you find that you get some blowback from people because you haven't made the quote unquote full transition, that
Of course.
you can't really speak for trans men because you haven't had the bottom surgery?
Yeah, right. So there's trans men out there who don't like me because I talk about my vagina and I say my life is amazing with it and I don't need a penis. And then they're like, yeah, you do need a penis. You need a penis to become a man. So you're not really. And I'm getting that from trans men. I'm just like, wow.
Yeah.
So my choice is not good enough for you, which is totally insane as well. It's like, why are we telling people how to transition? I don't care how you transition. What I care about is you making sure that that's the right space for you and that you don't make irreversible changes. Transitioning can cause irreversible changes. Imagine if right now I said, actually, I made a mistake and I want to go back to being a woman. Ain't going to happen. Everything you see right here is forever, ever, ever, and it's never going to change. And that is a really important part of transitioning medically, is different than transitioning socially.
Yeah. And I think like that idea that you need to make the quote unquote full transition to be considered this or that, it's still locked into this very limiting binary.
That's right.
And so the mind isn't free yet of this construction that it's, you know, female, male. And the fact that, you know, you're out there so much, you've got all these videos, there's tons of photos of you, there's a sculpture in a museum of you.
It's crazy.
Showing that this is another expression of a human being.
Yes.
You
Right
know,
on.
and we
Human
do need,
being.
yeah, and we need more examples of that, because that to me is like celebrating like real diversity, and that makes the world a richer place. If every fucking tree looked the exact same, it would be pretty goddamn boring.
Excellent.
You know, so
No
we celebrate diversity and difference in all other areas of life except with ourselves.
I know, we are so hard because I believe humans also are pack animals, and I believe that they on some level feel I've never been that guy. I'm not a pack. I've always been the guy who sort of was a loner, even as a woman. When I was in sports, I always was this guy who literally never felt comfortable being shoved into a whole group of people. I've always been sort of like a free thinker. I've always thought differently than a lot of right on.
Me too. Yeah.
And so again, there I am, and then the space again. And what you said earlier, I do believe I found my purpose in life, and I do believe I made it from suicide attempts, alcoholism, cutting. I could go on and on, my friend. And like, you're still here, so I have to celebrate my life, and I cannot let people on the internet try to squash me, because it's all really such an illusion that we've given such power to. We've given such power to this idea that the internet can take you out. When no, they cannot. Nothing can take you out unless you actually give that power over to let them take you out.
Yeah, it's just a virtual reality, one
That's
that we
right.
can choose to engage with or not.
That's right. That's exactly. And I don't engage with it. And when people send me hate mail, I delete it. I don't say. I used to be like, really, blah. And then I realized, wow, I'm actually feeding into it. When you delete it, it's literally out of your realm, and you're like, oh. and an hour later, like, I don't even remember what happened. And so people need to start learning how to delete hate. And then once you start deleting it out of you, it just doesn't affect you anymore.
Yeah, and like block haters, because really those would be people in quote unquote real life that you would have nothing to do with anyway.
Nothing. That's right. And you remember, I come from the 60s and 70s where we didn't have this stuff. My community never had this. I fought at ACT UP, Queer Nation. I fought for AIDS rights back 30 years ago. We actually socialized with people. We didn't have, that's why I say it's the internet. It has created such a distancing, weird space that scares me. And people who are smart, people who are actually smart and manipulative and have very bad intentions, have taken this space and know how to use it to create this kind of stuff. And that's the scary part of the internet, people who know how to manipulate it.
Well, and like what you said, the response to that is personal empowerment. And that goes back to like the core of this whole thing. Like, what are people really looking for? Well, they want to feel some sense of personal power. And, you know, that can be expressed in so many different ways, in like life supporting ways or life destroying ways, right? And both are kind of on a certain level equally attractive. You still feel powerful and you feel alive and purposeful. But we have to bring in, I think that's where the guidance of mentors and adults comes in, is help to steer that power into something that's positive and life affirming and creative and unifying, right?
Unifying, beautiful word.
Can we fight for unity instead of fighting against oppression or something, you know? Like for me, it's always taking the positive approach. Like take that anger, take that energy, direct it toward fighting for something or building something rather than fighting against, because you're always meeting that resistance, and that's going to deplete your energy. And, you know,
I've been there, I've done it. And I'm like finally going, what am I doing? I've literally got sucked. It's so easy to get sucked into it. And then you just literally have to take, and you're like, wow, I can't believe I just got sucked into that. It's that powerful. It can actually suck you in, and you just be.
Well, usually like when you get kind of spit out of the cycle of that, you know, you get sucked in, it chews you up, you get spit out, you're totally drained, you're beaten up, and you're like, God, why'd I fucking put myself through that?
Dude, I'm just like, I actually just did. I mean, I learned a lot from getting beat up. I learned a lot from disconnecting. I learned a lot from speaking my mind. I learned a lot from standing my ground and saying, no, I'm not going to be a part of this. And, you know, it's okay that you keep kicking me and you tell me you're going to cancel me and everyone cancel Buck and all this stuff. That, I said, you guys are so dumb. That makes me powerful. Don't you know what you're doing? You just keep repeating my name over and over. It doesn't matter that's in the hate cycle. You keep, so now people are Googling, who's this Buck Angel dude? And then it just, I go, you're actually making me more powerful. So maybe you should stop saying my name. And then, you know, they don't understand. They don't understand really. They're being misled. This is the other thing. I think whoever the leaders are being, these kids are being misled. And that's also a part that scares me. They're being misled into this idea that they have to think this way. They have to be this way. You have to speak this way, or you're transphobic. See how they've now made this word sort of like a mantra. If you don't get on board, you're immediately transphobic. And I'm like,
well, it's the othering, right?
Yeah.
You know, what comes to mind, I don't know if you've, you know, interesting talking to you, because other men like our age, I might talk about the men's movement that happened in the 90s. It was led by a poet named Robert Bly. He wrote a book called The Sibling Society, and it was really about the lack of older mentors in our culture and what's going on. And it's more where young people are looking to each other for guidance and support, because when they look up, they either don't trust older people or the older mentors aren't there for them, right? So they end up looking to themselves for guidance and support. And it's that peer support which doesn't have the earned wisdom and experience, so they can be misguiding each other. It gets really problematic when there's this kind of like only horizontal peer relationship rather than looking to mentors or having mentors available, right? So peers are great because they can offer support, but they can really only offer validation, right? So you feel the empathy and you're like, okay, I'm supported. There's other people who understand me, but it doesn't really help us grow. In order for us to grow, we need that someone to push us outside of our current limitations. So people who say, no, this is not the way it's been for me. I've seen a totally different thing happen. And like people like yourself who are offering a different perspective, and it's pushing up against their current beliefs.
That's
which
right.
are limited because they're young.
That's right. Right on. You actually said exactly what's happening. You're the first person I've heard that literally said it exactly what is happening. You're right. They're just feeding each other stuff and they're not having outside views. And what I said, the minute you get it, they get an outside view, everyone is like, no, don't listen to it. That speaks cult language to me. And the reason I keep saying cult is because I've been with people who have actually been raised in cults. And there are really parallel things that I see happening, shutting down parents or shutting down people who don't agree with you, removing them from your life. You know, they isolate you on some level. They say to create this language in order so that you feel special and that you're part of this. And that's why I use that word indoctrination. It's like, you know, dangling the cherry and saying, if you come over here, your life is going to be 100% better without having other perspectives. And so for me, I will listen to you. I might not be right. I'm always open to changing my mind. And that's when I say you've got to be open to other opinions. Even though you might not agree, you've got to hear other opinions, or all you're doing is saying the same. You're literally in a bubble. You're just saying the same thing over and over to yourself, and you're not growing as a person at all.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And I think these more negative groups, the ones that are always fighting against everything,
Yeah.
like misery loves company, man. If you join in that group, like nobody's joyful and happy in those
That's
groups,
right.
right? Because it's always about fighting against something. And that's how they feel alive and powerful. And as soon as there's nobody to fight, then you lose that.
That's right.
So we need to have groups that are positive and life affirming and all of that, right? And so the people feel the aliveness of that and the power of that, like the power of positivity, man. It's not some hippie ideal, it's real. And we find that out over time. Like being a young punk rocker, angry at the world,
that's right,
fighting against everything, I was fucking miserable.
That was me too, dude. I was a total punk rocker. I always use that analogy. I'm like, dude, when I was your age, I was a punk rocker. Punk rock was trans.
Yeah, that was the thing.
That's exactly right. It got people like me and you who didn't fit in, were angry, wanted to and then we got to go to mosh pits and jump on each other. I got my teeth knocked out. I was crazy. I was a girl. I was a shaved head chick, like totally like. Ah. So I get it. I know what's happening with the kids, but for me, it's not punk rock. It's not just, I don't see it. It can't just be a fad. Trans cannot be a fad. It can't
because it's got these lifelong repercussions, which is the difference.
Right.
I can shave off my mohawk and go straight and get a regular job and all that. But when you've had physical transition, there's no going back.
That is a whole other level. And that's what people need to start hearing. And they are. The actual world, you know, everybody sort of like laid over. It was weird. Like the trans movement just happened and everyone just sort of was like, okay, do whatever you need to do. They changed laws. It was the weirdest thing I've ever seen.
Look, that's the lack of elders in the community, right?
Right on.
The older people who will stand up and say, no.
Right on.
We're not letting you take over. You haven't earned that yet.
That's right. That's exactly right.
Really, this is for the good of all. Like that's the role of the elder. It's like you've lived through it, you understand and your biggest purpose is to support the health of the community. That's the role of the elder.
I've gone through hell and back. I almost died from testosterone. It would be so shitty of me not to share that knowledge. Yet you kids aren't listening to that knowledge. You think I'm too old. They say, sit down, you're old, you don't know anything. I'm like,
no, you're old enough to know.
I'm like, I say the same thing to my elders, sit down and shut up, you don't know anything. And then 5 years later, I realized, oh my God.
I should have listened.
I should have listened. And I'm like, in no other cultures, take the natives, they fucking revere their elders. They listen, they learn. There's so many cultures all over the world where elders are. Whether or not you agree with them, you must respect their voice. And so I don't know how that's why it's a fake community on some level to me.
Because there's no elders.
There's no elders, and it's built on some idea that if you say you're trans, you're trans.
Yeah, let's not even say fake, but maybe it's just not a healthy community, because a healthy community would have elders in it and they would be respected and listened to.
And there would be a space to have some kind of difference of
Yes.
opinions. There would be space to say, well, maybe I'm this kind of trans and not that kind of trans. But instead, everyone's in groups. This trans is not that trans. And if you believe in this, you don't believe in that. And they've just literally
Yeah.
broken off into all these factions, which is not trans. That's not community. That's something else.
Well, it's an unhealthy community at the
Yeah.
least. Yeah.
Yeah.
Wow. Well, what a journey it's been with you. I wasn't, this is
Thank you.
probably the topic that I have the least amount of experience with that I've ever covered on the podcast.
Wow.
And you've made it really easy for me to explore this
Thank you.
in a new way. I've never had some of the kind of thoughts. I've never expressed some of the things that I've said here.
Mm-hmm.
And I just want to thank you for giving me that opportunity. And
Brilliant.
hopefully after I share this to spark more interest, insight in other people, and maybe they'll look you up and um, broaden their horizons a little bit. Because once you get into the Buck Angel world, man, you're
Be prepared, people.
yeah, be prepared.
It's so insane. But you know what? I create conversation. It's all I ever care about is creating conversation. So I'll post stuff and then I'll just walk away. And people are going all over the place. And I interject my voice. Calm down. Everyone just is entitled to an opinion here. It's the name calling I can't handle. It's just so immature and stupid. Like we're all going to have different opinions. But, I really appreciate your time and energy and really wanting to educate the world on what's happening, because really it's just a lot out there and people need to see what's happening. And so, my voice is only my voice. I'm not the leader of any community. I'm coming from an experience, and that's what I want to share with the world.
Well, and I think it's important to point out that, this is something that's really just evolving now. And so we're all trying to figure it out as we go. And that's something that's become clear to me in this conversation, talking to someone who transitioned 20, 30 years ago. You're still learning, you're still trying to listen and figure out what's going on. So compassion to everybody. Let's fight for more understanding, and let's like really put our energy into unifying and supporting everyone, because we're all in this together, whether we like it or not.
That's right. Right. You ain't going nowhere, my friend.
No, that's the reality. Cancel him on social media. He's still out there. Okay.
I'm still here. So it's not like you can just throw me off the earth. Like, that's not going to happen. Right on.
Okay. So if we were going to leave adults who are parents of or otherwise supporting trans kids, what would you like to leave them with?
Yeah, first off, I want to say you're a beautiful parent, because you are listening to your child, and it's a very difficult space you're in, and I feel you, but it's not the end of the world. So what I really highly suggest to parents who are struggling with this is to get a therapist. That's the first thing you need to do. Your child's going to say they want this, I deal with parents all the time. The kids always just want everything now. That's even outside of trans. Kids want things now.
Yeah.
But I highly suggest you seek out therapy. And if there's anybody out there that is struggling with that, please reach out to me, and I could actually help you to get a therapist in your area and to guide you into a space that I feel is very healthy. So I want to appreciate to all the parents out there who are listening to their kids and struggling with that. It's a real thing, and I feel you and I hear you, but I as an elder, am there for you.
Wonderful. Thanks. And if people do want to find out more about you, what's the best place to do it?
So easy to find me. Buckangel.com, Twitter, Buck Angel. Be careful on Twitter. And Instagram, Buck Angel. And I have Facebook. It's official Buck Angel, but I'm not a big person. Facebook is...
We're phasing Facebook out.
Yeah, it's gotten a little nasty. And energy is everything for me. I believe, like I said earlier, what comes and goes is a big deal. So I don't surround myself with too much of that negativity.
Yeah. And you know what, I was just reminded, before we go, I've talked to a lot of people about plant medicine on this podcast, because I've had a lot of really deep healing and transformation thanks to the plants. And I know that you've got a cannabis company. What's up with that?
Yeah, I got sober 30 plus years ago from drugs and alcohol. And through that, I really became a much better person. But I realized that I have horrible insomnia, and look at my energy level is totally insane and I can't go to sleep. So somebody said, dude, try some cannabis. And I was like, I'm sober. And they're like, you take sleeping pills. And I'm like, oh, you're right.
Yeah.
So I used cannabis and it changed my life. It's not a gateway drug. It's not any of that. It's an actual plant medicine. And so through that, I realized that there was and cannabis became legal in California. And I realized at that point, oh my God, I could totally get on this. And so I started a company with a transsexual buddy of mine. And it's the first all trans owned cannabis company. And it's called Pride Wellness. And Pride Wellness specifically is specifically to educate the LGBT community on the use of cannabis as a medication and as a plant medicine, and how to actually expand your life and as opposed to using drugs and alcohol. And we give back to the community. So every time you buy products from me, a part of the proceeds go to the LGBT Center here in Los Angeles, specifically senior services. So, you know, again,
taking care of the elders.
Of course, if we would not be here if it wasn't the elders. And we have homeless gay people here in Los Angeles, homeless. That breaks my heart. The people who fought for us to get here are homeless. What? So yeah, I just, you know, community means a lot to me, but community is also about creating space within that community. So, and teaching all different kinds of things. So I'm very blessed to have been able to get into the cannabis sector.
And I wanted to ask you about one product specifically. I heard you mention on a podcast. I think you're recommending to the person you're talking to or something, but you were talking about like a substitute for Viagra that's CBD based.
Yeah.
I've never heard of that before. So
right.
What's up?
I created the world's first erection drink called Buckshot, and has CBD in it. And Buckshot is like, I can't keep it in stock. It's insane. But that being said, yeah, it's the first of its kind, and it's just you know, I'm a sexual person. I believe in sex, and I believe in sex as a way of connecting to people. And so, yeah, I created within the cannabis market. I created this drink called the Buckshot, which is called the boner drink, and it's natural and it works. And you know, that's everything. I'm not really into pharmaceuticals and all of that kind of stuff. So Viagra's nasty.
Yeah.
Oh,
wow. Okay. Maybe I'll talk to you offline about some
talk to me
products.
offline.
Maybe I can get a little care package.
I'll hook you up. Right on.
All right. Buckangel.com. Again, thanks so much, man. I really appreciate it.
On.
Yeah. Take care. Hope to talk to you soon.
My friend.